First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here in front of the White House to remember and commemorate the Armenian Genocide. 104 years ago, 1.5 million Armenians and other minority groups were systematically targeted and murdered by the Ottoman Empire based on their identity. Fueled by racism and xenophobia, the Young Turk regime ordered that these groups be taken out of their homes and forced to march into the Syrian desert. This was a horrific, inconceivable loss of human life. But through the strength and determination of its survivors came the growth of the robust Armenian diasporas that we know today, from Australia to Europe to here in the United States. I myself am a byproduct of this, just like many of us here today are. Since my own grandfather, Matossian, was a young boy when the Ottoman police came for his family in Aintab in Western Armenia. I remember him telling me that when his family heard that the Ottoman authorities were coming for Armenian families, he had to break into the Aintab City Hall building at night with his father to erase our family name and address from the official city register, to then leave their home and never return. Survive and move on, that was their only option. He eventually moved to California, joined the US military in World War II before starting a small business. And I bring this up because I think the narrative of our grandparents and great-grandparents who survived the genocide and moved to the US as refugees and immigrants is a very American story. They came here to avoid persecution and utter annihilation, and in search of opportunities to better themselves and their families. Many wanted to buy into the American way of life at the time and to contribute to society here, not only through their language and culture, but with their minds and their hands as laborers, doctors, engineers, artists, and even politicians. In this way, Armenians have become an integral part of our multicultural society that we have today in the US. In the same context of Armenians contributing to the United States, this country actually has a very long and proud history of supporting Armenians. Just like how the Armenian Genocide was the first of several genocides of the 20th century, the Near East Relief was one of the first global humanitarian projects of its kind in the history of mankind. In response to Ambassador Henry Morgenthal's eyewitness accounts of Armenians being deported from their homes and marched across the desert in 1915, thousands of Americans banded together to raise millions of dollars for food, clothing, and materials for shelter that were shipped to Turkey, effectively saving more than 1 million lives. It was so profound and it had so much support from the general public that it was officially recognized and supported by the US Congress, the Near East Relief. But that same government body, despite passing Armenian genocide legislation in 1975, 1984, and 1996, has remained silent regarding this crime for over 20 years. President Trump, the most recent in a long line of presidents since Ronald Reagan, has failed us in recognizing the genocide as well, and we're gathered here outside of his own home to demand that he rectify his mistake. But despite this, our work continues, and I'm immensely hopeful and excited for our future, and I'd like to tell you why. Today, more than ever, we have strong bipartisan support from allies in Congress in calling for a permanent US policy to properly commemorate the Armenian Genocide, end US complicity in Turkey's denial, and urge the teaching of Armenian genocide history in public schools as part of our broader efforts to prevent future atrocities. House Resolution 296 and Senate Resolution 150, both introduced just this week, already have over 80 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives and 60 co-sponsors in the Senate. Now is the time to pass these resolutions and to pressure the president to set the record straight and honor the incredible commitment and compassion that the US itself showed during the Near East Relief efforts in 1915. At the same time, though, while we work with Congress and demand that President Trump and other world leaders finally wake up and acknowledge the facts, I want to emphasize that we all have, each one of us, a part to play in this global call for reparations and justice. I personally am so excited by all the ongoing work that our community and allies are doing, and I wanted to give you two quick examples of that work. First, in 2015, Armenian youth in California started the Divest Turkey movement to call on the University of California system to divest more than $60 million that the university system is currently invested in via government bonds issued by the Republic of Turkey. This resolution passed unanimously at all 9 UC campuses, and even then the California State Assembly, which voted in 2018 in favor of divesting $500 million that the state of California has dedicated towards the Turkish government. This is a completely grassroots, peaceful protest of funding going towards the denialist Turkish regime. It's all about students, youth, and the residents of one of the largest states of our nation reclaiming their agency over where their tuition and tax dollars go to. Second, there's a growing movement of Armenian life in Turkey today. thousands of hidden Armenians who concealed their Armenian identity in Turkey for decades are coming out and revealing themselves. They're speaking Armenian, they're being baptized in Armenian churches, and now more and more Armenians from the diasporas all around the world are actually going back to Western Armenia and re-engaging with these hidden Armenians. If you think about it, that's almost the exact opposite of what the Young Turk regime imagined when they set out to begin the genocide. Furthermore, Garo Paylan, an Armenian member of the Turkish parliament, is leading a very powerful and legitimate call for genocide recognition within his government. He's paid the price for this personally when he was physically attacked in parliament in 2016. I mention these because I want to call on you to join me in calling on President Trump to recognize this thoroughly documented event in human history as what it is, genocide. But I also ask you to join me in using his deafening silence on the topic as a motivation for yourself to keep up the fight. Let it fuel your own desire to keep up the fight for recognition and reparations that we deserve, whether that be politically or culturally, through personal or organizational means, and continue the march for justice. Thank you.
Thank you.